Hello, this is Dr. Barry Green. Welcome to Releasing the Past and Healing Your Inner Child. This slide presentation is designed to give you an insight into the nature of what we call your inner child and into the scientific understanding about your inner child and to the immense benefits that you can receive by being connected to what is known as your inner child. We know that when a human comes into the world, we don't bring with us any knowledge of how to live our life, of who we are, and who other people are. So this process of childhood development is one of absolute necessity to learn. The learning that we have in childhood is not from a logical place because logic doesn't develop until approximately 7. So it's simply absorbing information through our senses, what we see and hear, what we smell, what we taste, what we feel. And this creates what science calls neuroencoded information. Neuroencoding is quite amazing. Let's say that a child has never seen or tasted a banana until the first time that it experiences it. And it will be a completely new experience. The neuroencoding will register in the subconscious, that part before logic starts, the taste, the smell, what it looks like, the feel of it, all of these sensory qualities. And that information will be stored about the banana. In our adult life, there's an amazing process that goes on. If we are not totally in the moment, meaning absolutely present to the now, with no thoughts, nothing to distract us, then if we are not totally present in the now, when we eat a banana, we don't truly experience what we're eating in the moment. We experience the first neuroencoding of what a banana tasted like. So we're literally living in that past experience unless we can 100% be in the moment. And of course, as most of us know, that is very difficult to do, and certainly very difficult to do on a consistent basis. So let's take a look now and start to try and understand this idea of an inner child, what it means, the science behind it, and how it can benefit you. When our child of the past came into this world, we know that it came in a state that was very, very pure and very innocent, because again, there's been no scientific evidence that we are born with anything that we bring with us in this lifetime. You may have understanding about past lives and reincarnation, but in this physical life that we are living, what we know is that we come into this world with nothing. And so this inner child that starts to explore and discover and neuroencode about the world, how does it do that? It does that from a place of pure curiosity. It does it from a place of complete innocence and purity. It has no previous experience to overlay onto it anything that it sees, hears, smells, tastes, or feel. So it's completely pure and innocent. Because of that, it's absolutely honest. And because it has no capability to live in the past or the future, it lives absolutely in the moment. This inner child is connected to a source of creativity. It's connected to what we know is unconditional love. It hasn't learned anything other than the experience that it has, which, coming from purity and innocence, brings an unconditional love. These are the qualities that our child of the past and every child brings with it. This is why it's so easy to love a little child, because they are so pure. They have such pure love to give. It's a wonderful experience and can be a phenomenal learning for an adult parent. And so these qualities that the child of the past and our inner child, which is a reflection of that, share, is said to be natural. It's said to be what is real and true about us as humans. It is said to be our true human nature. So when you connect to that inner child that still dwells within you, you are connecting to your true inner nature. What a gift that is. That gift of innocence, that gift of honesty, that gift of purity, that gift of unconditional and pure love. So this inner child that lives within us and the child of the past is our connection to the pure truth. The pure truth is just simply what is, the principles, the laws that govern all things, principles like gravity. This inner child within us has an innate knowing of these principles. It's connected, it is said, through the heart to these principles. And this child of the past and this inner child within us is connected to what we can call spirit, or higher power, or God, or Jesus, or whatever it is that you see is that one, that source. And of course, this is our connection to what is real love, unconditional love, just pure love, because the child is connected to the heart and to the body. There is no logic until age 7, so we don't have the logical mind to confuse or disconnect us. So this part of us that we call the inner child, psychology calls the subconscious. It really isn't subconscious until 7 years of age, when logic begins, and then the information from childhood does become subconscious. In the physiology and anatomy of the body, the subconscious is technically 2 of the 3 brains that we have inside our skull. This awareness of a 3-brain operating system is called the triune brain. In childhood, before the age of 7, 2 of those brains are operating. And the other one, which holds logic and the right hemisphere activities, does not begin to operate until approximately age 7. So these 2 brains of childhood are what's called the reptilian brain, also known as the survival brain, which is responsible for food, sleep, sex, and self-preservation of both the physical body and the sense of self. When this brain gets activated, it first of all has no emotional capacity. That's why it's referred to as reptilian or cold-blooded. So it has no ability to be compassionate, no empathy capabilities, no ability to feel. It also has no capability to learn from mistakes. It can't make any corrections on activities that it performs. It doesn't have the capacity to do that. But what it does do, and very powerfully so, is it activates tremendous unloading of biochemical enzymes and hormones to basically help us with what could be called the fight or flight mechanism. So it will tremendously empower the body. The second brain that's operative during childhood is called the limbic brain. This is where memory and emotions are stored. And so you have a physical brain, which is the reptilian, and you have an emotional brain, which is the limbic. But in childhood, up to the age of 7, there is no logical brain, which is that large one that occupies most of your skull, but doesn't start operating until age 7. So once again, to review some of this information about what's called our inner child, or also known as our subconscious, one and the same. 80% of everything we learn as an adult is imprinted by the age of 5. 80% of all of our learning for all of our life by the age of 5. And remember, there's no logic to determine if it works, if it doesn't work, if it's good, if it's damaging, if it's dysfunctional, etc., etc. In the studies that have been done, extensive studies, the average person, the 80% that we learn by the age of 5, for the average person, 75% of that is total delusion. It's not natural, it doesn't work, it'll sabotage us. To summarize it, it's just junk. This, if you think about it, is a pretty incredible piece of information, because if 80% of all we ever learn is learned by the age of 5, and 75% of that is junk, that means that only 20% of all we learn by the age of 5 is really going to work for us. And we only have 20% more that we'll learn for the rest of our life, which we don't know what that learning is going to be, functional or not. So at best, the average person has 40% successful learning to live their life by. That's not even a 50-50 chance of being able to have a functional, potentialized life. This, of course, is one of the reasons that we've heard so many times that we have such an incredible unmet potential. And once again, in all the studies that have been done in the recent years, and they've been extensive, it's been clearly discovered that 90 to 95% of all decisions as adults come from the subconscious. We know that there is no wiring, no link between the logical mind and the subconscious. So they can't, so to speak, help out each other and work out situations. They don't have that connection to do that. So what that means is that we end up with a pretty amazing trick that is a pretty also amazing delusion. The delusion is that our logical adult mind is doing all the work because we constantly are thinking and figuring it out and analyzing and doing all these things. But the reality is the content that it's getting for these decisions is coming up from the subconscious. And because it's subconscious, we don't even know that it's happening until it manifests in our consciousness. So, what is our human condition? What is the nature of childhood development for a human that is completely unique from all of the other living species on the planet? We are learning machines. We come with no built-in knowledge. We come with no what's called natural instinct. So if we're left alone, we won't be able to take care of ourselves. And as infants, we have no capabilities to do anything, and we will therefore die. Animals, within less than an hour, can be performing very complex tasks that can take us months and months to do, such as walking. So we are a learning machine, and every day from the beginning of the time that we're born, there is an explosion, billions upon billions of new raw nerve cells. These nerve cells are simply going to imprint, or what we call neuroencode, information from the senses. None of it's logical, because our logical brain, as we talked about, isn't working yet. So we don't understand what's happening. We just, so to speak, enter the sensory, hear, smell, taste, feel, see, etc., into these raw nerve cells. When these nerve cells take the data from the senses, they are automatically sealed with a chemical called myelin, and this process of sealing the nerve cell with the data is called myelination. In your computer, it would simply be called save. Now, how can that be changed? What is the, so to speak, delete function? What we know from research is that there are 3 ways that we can delete the old information and have a chance for new information. Those 3 ways are serious injury, serious illness, and reconnecting to the original experience. So we know that many, many, many people over all of time have had great transformations after they've been seriously injured. Athletes can no longer be the person that they knew themselves to be. They have to look at, who am I? People go into the hospital or get extremely sick, and many of these people have tremendous transformational processes simply because these raw nerve cells that have this imprint on it now are providing an opportunity to delete the information and put in new, and have a new system to operate from. Just like taking your computer to an expert and having them fix your operating system. The subconscious in a human is our operating system. Faulty data creates faulty actions. So what we've already talked about is, for the human condition, most of what we're going to experience and imprint, which we loosely call learning, though there's no understanding of it, this imprinting or neuroencoding, 75% of it is just junk. It's going to do nothing but sabotage our life, causes stress, anxiety, trauma, and end up creating bad choices, dysfunction, and consequences that we regret, and nowhere near be able to give us our potential for a fulfilling life. So this child of the past that we call our inner child that lives within us still, it is met with a circumstance in which there's all this faulty learning. And first of all, let's take a look at, why does that circumstance exist? Parents want to raise functional and healthy kids. Parents love their kids. And even though parents may do some pretty horrific and horrible, terrible things, believe it or not, they do it in the name of love. There is no question about that. I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of clients who had some terrible childhood experiences. And it was very clear over and over again that their parents always thought that it was the best thing for the child. Of course, it was an unbelievable, tragic delusion, but that's what the parents had been taught in their childhood as to how life works and what you have to do to learn to be able to deal with life. So there's been many kids who have been abused and beaten in the name of love. Now, is it true love? Not at all. Is it unconditional love? Not in the least. But this is what goes on. Primarily, why do we have this faulty learning process in the abundance of childhood development circumstances? One word: ignorance. What does that mean, ignorance? Well, if you're listening to this, think about it. What do you know about your parents before they had you? Did they go and systematically study childhood development? They might have systematically studied and practiced birthing methods, which many, many, many parents do. But did they systematically do the same thing for learning, what do I need to teach my child that is the science and the history and the experience of so many thousands over the years that will truly make my child be a functional adult? I can tell you from my experience, starting in 1981 when I began with my first client, that at this point, after hundreds and hundreds of clients, I have had what is actually only possibly one parent of one client who studied childhood development to try and help raise their child. Considering there's at least 6 major theories of childhood development, it's unclear as to whether that truly would have helped with their raising their child. And yet, one out of hundreds and hundreds is a small percentage of just 1%, far less than 1%. So again, we live in a world in which there is so much dysfunction, so many things happening that are really from human ignorance and greed and power struggles and so many dysfunctions. Why does that happen? Why is all the violence happening? Simple. We've never learned to be functional adults. Our parents wanted us to be. They had good intentions, but they just didn't know. Simple as that. So they passed on the lineage, generation of generation before them, of what was supposed to be a good way to raise a child. And the statistics show us it really wasn't. 75% was just delusions and non-functional, dysfunctional information. So what does a child do when they can't get what they need in childhood development? They develop what we call self-soothing strategies. Psychology also has called these defense mechanisms. And they may either do what we call act out, be angry and throw things and hit and bite and things like that, or they may withdraw and repress. Instead of the wonderful emotions of pure childhood, the innocence and the curiosity and the love and the generosity and all those things that are just a pure heart, they come up with negative emotions because they hurt. A child hurts not to live in the purity of truth and love. So they're hurt, they can become very angry, resentful, scared, lonely, withdraw, be anxious, worried, doubtful, fearful, feel helpless, and feel lost. So the goal of this program is to help you integrate all of your being, your body, your mind, and your feelings. And what we know is that your feelings and your body are really what's represented by your inner child. They're represented and connected to your anatomical feelings and body through your limbic and your reptilian brain. And so now let's talk about the last element, which is your logical part of your being. And this is what we call the adult, so to speak. It's not a fully mature biological and intellectual adult, but for the sake of developmental processes, we're going to call this logical part of ourselves, the logical adult mind. So what about it? As we mentioned before, doesn't start development until you're approximately 7 years old. And your logical brain cannot directly experience reality. It processes the information that your feelings and your body present to it after it's already happened. We also know your logical brain is not directly connected to the anatomy and physiology that allows you to have feelings. So it can't feel. It can't experience. It can absolutely, and it will continuously interpret, analyze, evaluate your feelings and your experiences. What we know that unless an adult is 100% living in the moment, that the logical brain is only going to be making 5 to 10% of the decisions on a day-to-day basis. The other 90 to 95% will be made by the subconscious. And an amazing kind of trick, like a magic act, is going to happen, which is that it's going to appear and feel like the logical brain is doing all of it. It's figuring everything out. But truly speaking, the content, the material that it's getting is almost all coming from the subconscious. So it's just interpreting and processing subconscious data. It's not creating that data from its own information. And the last thing we want to talk about in general about the logical brain is an amazing piece of information that's rarely known, but this is the reality of how it works. The logical brain operates very, very slowly. 40 bits of information per second. Not 40,000, not 40 million, simply 40. 10, 20, 30, 40. And that is an amazingly slow computer speed. If you might be someone who's been on the internet for many years, you remember the first way to get on was called dial-up. Went through the telephone system. And you could dial up to get on the internet, and pretty much you could go out to dinner and a movie and come back and maybe it would be connected. Of course, I'm exaggerating, but not a whole lot. So the reality is your logical brain is amazingly slow. 40 bits of information per second. Your subconscious part of your mind, your brain, what speed does it operate at? It is the fastest computer on the planet. Not even the great supercomputers can keep up with it. It operates at 20 million bits per second. So what happens when this subconscious information is agitated or triggered and it sends, let's say, 5 million bits of information into the logical brain, which can only process 40 bits per second? So you can probably imagine it is going to get overloaded, and that's exactly what happens. And when it gets overloaded, it'll basically shut down. Now we have the most common scenario that we know. You're in a situation, something has triggered you, and all of a sudden you're saying or doing something that you don't want to say or do. Or on the other side of the coin, you're not saying or not doing what you really want to say or do. Why is that? Because now your subconscious, that inner child, has been left in a very challenging situation and does not have, so to speak, an adult to support it. So it's in an adult world, in an adult situation that's challenging, and it doesn't have adult skills. So what does it do? It does something childlike, and it's inappropriate most of the time. Then what happens? The logical brain slowly comes back as things settle, and it comes back, so to speak, online, and now it goes, oh, Oh, that was terrible. That was horrible. I'm so sorry. I don't want to do that again. I'm just amazed that I said that or did that or didn't say or didn't do that. And tries to resolve a mess. So let's go into a little bit more detail with this part of us that's our logical part. There are two major developmental stages for logic. The first stage starts at about 7. It's basically primary or simple logic that allows us to really understand. All the information that's been neuroencoded up to the age of 7 now starts to have logic, simple logic, and put things together. So it allows us to be able to effectively communicate. It allows us to truly understand what's going on. And because of that, we have two things that now show up. We have a logically developed personality. I feel that this is who I am because my 11-year-old, at the time I'm making this PowerPoint for you, my 11-year-old, when he was in preschool, let's say around the age of 2 to 3, he would come home one day and say, "I'm really smart." And I would ask him, "Oh, that's wonderful. How do you know that?" "Oh, Miss Sally told me that I'm one of the smartest kids." "Ah, do you know what smart is?" "Yes." "What is it?" "I don't know." And this is typical. It's humorous, it's funny, and children constantly are in that state where they're just creating really funny remarks simply because they don't have a logical mind that can help them to grasp and understand what they're truly saying. So, personality develops. When you get to 7, because logic starts, and so now my son, let's say, is in 2nd grade. He's about 8 years old. He comes home and he says, "Dad," very different voice tonality and much more of a young man, says this very seriously, "Dad, I'm the smartest kid in class." Say, "Oh, really, Sam? What makes you say that, son?" "Well, every time we have a math exercise, we're given 5 minutes to do it. I finish it in probably a minute, and everybody else has to work and work and work to finish it." "Oh, that's a pretty good indicator of your math skill. Anything else?" "Yes, when we have reading, I'm done and I answer the questions, I get them right, and everybody else is still working on it." "That's another good indicator." "Well, I'm glad that you're discovering your intelligence. It's wonderful." So he understood what it meant to be smart. Just like other aspects of personality that children develop, they start to understand that they truly have that aspect. And so when logical learning starts, the logical brain will now start to gather its own database of experiences and facts. And there's a very interesting thing that happens for this database in the logical mind. So you're in school, let's say you're studying history, right? So most of what a child is going to study in history, they will never experience. So they're learning something that truly is for them simply a potential fantasy. It may be the truth. It may be something that somebody made up. Without direct experience, they have no way to know if it really is what happened. And so much of our logical learning is exactly that. We learn information, we learn facts without the direct experience. And so we don't have what's called an embodied experience. We're not getting it through the senses. It's simply logical, factual data that may not be true. With direct experience, we can't deny what we experience. We know that we had that experience, and for us, that becomes a truth that is real and embodied, so to speak. So this is very different. in that aspect of the two systems of learning. So the second and final developmental stage of logical processing comes roughly around puberty. We call this conceptual logic. Now the mind can get so expansive, so big, so huge. Big ideas, big plans, big theories. And if you remember your teenage years, or you have a child that's a teenager, you'll certainly know that this is true. As a matter of fact, right now, I'm making this presentation in 2018, and we've just had the largest protest march and movement that we've ever had in our history that was completely set up by the teenagers from Parkdale, Florida, that were survivors of the horrific shooting. And they are now going after gun control. And this is inspiring and amazing and profound. And it just shows what happens when puberty creates both conceptual logic for a teenager, and it also, because of the hormones and the energy released, creates an immense amount of change in the physical body. Our physical body after puberty becomes bigger, stronger, and so much more capable. And in the development of a young adult, at this stage, there is something that's really critical, but it is seldom understood and seldom really experienced or developed. And what is critical at this stage to become a functional adult is to learn how to be grounded in our physical and emotional body. And this is something that is very physical. It's not something that the mind can just create. You either have it within your body that you're grounded, or you don't. This is something that I can really talk to. I've practiced one of the most ancient arts of grounding, Tai Chi Chuan, since 1975. So over 40 years of intense practice with a grandmaster from China. And he was a living embodiment of what it was to be grounded, and it was virtually supernatural. And this process of grounding is like what's called the lightning rod effect. You take a metal pole, put it on the top of the building, connect a metal cable to it, send it down to the ground several feet, lightning hits the pole, goes through the cable, goes into the earth, no damage is done. Grounding is like that. When we get charged up and triggered and agitated in our mind, charged up and triggered and agitated in our emotions, being able to be physically grounded will help to simply take those agitations and that conflicted energy and send it back into the earth and leave us back in a state of balance. So this is, like early childhood development, something that simply just isn't usually known in most of our culture, and certainly not developed or cultivated. So it leaves us with this new body at puberty that has so much possibility for powerful energy to be challenged because it hasn't quite learned how to be effectively worked with. So let's take a look at the connection between these aspects of ourself, between the inner child, which represents our heart and body, and between the logical adult mind. Well, the logical adult mind goes with a big, powerful, capable body. And contained within that big, capable body is our inner child. And for me, an image that really resonated was when I first saw the movie called Iron Man. Who, you remember Iron Man? It was a very cocky, creative scientist genius who developed this suit that could almost instantly surround him and encase him with a high-tech computer and weaponry and things on that order so he could be a superhero. And we are like that. We have this big, strong, powerful body. The only difference is we don't have the high technology that Iron Man had. We have very low technology with the slowest computer on the planet, probably. And we have the inner child that's inside of this big, powerful body. And this logical adult, intellectual part of ourselves simply processes the information that comes from the inner child, making us believe that the logical mind is really coming up with all that information. It's not. It's being fed that by the subconscious inner child. And for most people, growing up in this culture, we have been taught over and over again and seen it all through the culture that when you are growing up and you get to be a young adult, it's not okay to be childlike. We have so many admonitions that get thrown at us to grow up. Who do you think you are? Stop acting like a child. That's very foolish. Only kids act that way. You're better than that. Stop having all these feelings. You're not still a little girl or a little boy. So most of the time, the adult logical mind suppresses the inner child. And of course, when you push anything down inside of us, it will create a tremendous pressure. And our organism will always want to release that pressure and simply wait for a window of opportunity. And for most people, that's exactly what happens. So this inner child that gets repressed and pushed down inside of us, it's not happy with that. It's not happy with another major abandonment syndrome. So what happens? A window of opportunity happens for the child to come out and express itself, and it does so in a very inappropriate and disproportionate way, which of course just spirals back to the logical adult coming back and pushing the little child down again, not even realizing and understanding what truly happened. So it just is a vicious cycle, so to speak. And once again, remember that the physiology is that we have this incredibly slow logical mind and this incredibly fast subconscious mind that can just overwhelm and shut down the logical mind when it has a trigger effect and sends millions of pieces of information into the very slow logical mind. So we have that scenario where the logical mind shuts off, there's no adult, so to speak, and there's only a child left in a very challenging situation that it probably can't deal with. So when we have this learning in childhood about what does it mean to be an adult? For a child, what do we learn that it means to be an adult? Most of us learn the same thing, that an adult is all-knowing, that mommy and daddy or whoever is acting in that role, they know everything. If we're in a preschool and we ask a 3-year-old, what's the moon made out of? They may say something like cream cheese or green cheese or whatever they say, and then you ask them, how do you know? And they'll say, probably with a look of disbelief that you don't understand this, but they'll say, my mommy told me, or my daddy told me. And then you can question that. Well, does your mommy or daddy know what they're talking about? Then you'll probably get another intense look of disbelief, like, what? How can you ask that? And they'll tell you, yes, they know everything. As children, we see our parents as incredibly powerful. And again, if asked about Is your daddy strong? We probably get some response like, he's the strongest man in the world. We see our adults as extremely capable. We absolutely see them as in control because for the most part, that's what they're going to be doing, controlling our lives and possibly trying to control the lives of others. And the last thing we usually learn about adults in our childhood is that they have free will, which means they can do what they want. But unfortunately, we also usually learn that as an adult, they take away the free will of others, because when our parents control us, they take away our free will. So what happens when we grow up to be adults? We've been neuroencoded that we're supposed to be all-knowing, we're supposed to be powerful, we're supposed to be capable, we're supposed to be in control, and that we will have free will to do whatever we want. Now, for most of us, we have these ideals, but we haven't really learned, we haven't been neuroencoded how to actually achieve and manifest them. So for most of us, they create what can be an enormous amount of stress and disappointment and discouragement and even depression. So what is our goal in this training? Well, first, we want to identify, because there's so much of it, what was your subconscious learning, to see if it was something that you feel benefits you, or if you feel you want to let go of. And if you feel you want to let go of it, the next goal we have is to release it. And so we have three major methods that we'll use. Two of them, you'll have a choice to use one or the other, or both, whichever works for you. And one of them we'll use throughout the whole process, because we want to, so to speak, cover all the bases. And the one method we'll use is a method that works with the eyes, and it comes from the tradition, the therapy process called EMDR, eye movement desensitization repetition, and we simply work with looking at a dot that goes left to right, left to right, left to right. After we release the faulty learning, we want to replace it with positive learning. So you don't have that old faulty learning anymore, and what you have is something that'll work for you. And lastly, we want to learn how to integrate that part that's called the inner child, which is actually your subconscious, with your logical adult, so that we can be whole and functional in our life. And what that simply means is that the two parts are able now to talk to each other and work together and problem solve together and use the qualities that they both have to mutually support each other. Because if you remember, logical adult cannot feel and cannot directly experience life. The child feels and it directly experiences life because it's directly connected to the senses, which are our direct experience of life. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope this has been insightful and possibly even at some points revelationary for you and profound. So at this point from here on, we'll now work with the rest of this PowerPoint as we go through the training. So blessings, and once again, thank you very much.